Pete has his own landscaping business. He designs and installs incredible landscapes. He has his own native plant nursery up in Oakland. He is an artist. I mean, just look at the thing over on the end. That's typical of Pete's work. He has a way of putting things together that's just amazing. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. By the way, Hidden Villa is one of the places where I learned how to propagate by volunteering for their sale many years ago. Between there and Gerda and a few other people, I learned quite a lot about propagation. So, but I'm not an expert on ferns. I just want to put that out there. I don't propagate by spores. A little bit I have, and I'm starting to again, just using the very simple shoebox method, if any of you are familiar with that. But it's mostly I do just divisions. I grow things and grow ferns by divisions, and I've been able to get some really great ferns and keep them over the years and slowly propagate them just by divisions. And that's the way I do it. So, but I do grow a lot of other stuff too, a lot of woodland things, and I do a lot of shade gardens. It seems like, and not all ferns are for the shade. Also, by the way, some of them that I have here are for the sun too. So I'll just go on. East Bay Wilds, we're a landscape business. We design, install, and maintain landscapes. Here's one that's about 7 or 8 years, or that's probably 8 or 9 years old now. One of the earlier ones that I did in Castro Valley. And that's not during the flowering season. This is pretty colorful during the flowering season. And we are also a nursery, and we grow a lot of unusual plants. Yeah, that's better. Thank you. We grow a lot of unusual plants, like this yellow flower here is the Burr marigold, or Biden's lavis, which is one of the ones that I've been growing, and it's from this area. You can't find it around here. It's just, and it flowers forever. So hopefully, this is Lucy, by the way. Hopefully she'll be here. If not, maybe somebody could take her up to Martin. Anyway, this Biden's lavis is a butterfly magnet. If you don't grow it, it's very, very easy to grow. It turns into a giant thing of flowers for a very long time. Great plant. It's deciduous though, so it looks dead at the moment. So ferns. I do love using ferns for a variety of reasons, but I just love the way that they go with. I love pottery. I have a huge collection of pottery, and as well as a huge collection of little garden ornaments that I've been collecting, antique garden ornaments for many years now. And you'll see there's a little frog over there, and I've got more in my truck. I've got also a lot more plants in my truck. If anybody is interested in them, we can talk outside afterwards about them. So, a couple of the more unusual things that I grow myself are like the Podium schooleri, or the leatherleaf fern on the left here. So slow growing. That one is produced in the last 10 years or so. That's produced like 3 or 4 other plants, including one over here. And they take like 3 or 4 years to even look good. But boy, they look great once they do. They require a lot of humidity. And on the right is the coffee fern. That I've been growing for a long time, and I slowly propagate that also. I get about 20 new plants a year of that one. So now I have that one here. Here's another unusual one that I grow, Aspidotus californica, or the California lace fern, which is a real beauty. This one Roger Rach gave me about 7 or 8 years ago, and I grow it with one of the brodias, the harvest brodia there. And that's one that can take quite a lot of sun, but it's better in partial shade too. Other things that grow with them, I love this is the, what's it called, the gold, Taft's gold piggyback plant that is local. It's a selection of a local one. That's great with ferns. Behind it is the large plant I have over there, which is a California polypody, which is fine in full sun or full shade. It does great in either. It just needs water during its growing season. It also disappears at the end of summer, the middle of summer. But there's other things that it can be grown with that come to life at that time. So it's a great one, a very easy one. Adiantum aludicum. Now I'm going to go through the ferns pretty much, most of the ferns anyway, that I grow alphabetically. The five-fingered fern, this is a fairly common one, needs a constant source of moisture down in there somewhere. It can take a little bit of drying out, but not much. More than some and less than others. So, very beautiful Lacey fern. It looks like this a lot. It's about knee height, a little bit less. And this is one that's growing in serpentine, so it's only about shin height.
How much sun does it need?
It can take a fair amount. It can take about half sun, but it needs more water that way. So I suggest very little sun, like 1 hour of sun for most locations is best. This is the way it grows, where it's really, really happy. This is a huge wall, as big as this wall here. It's bigger than what you can see there, but it's as big as this wall here, and it's a clay, or it's a sandy loam, pat sandy loam bank. It's near Point Reyes, where the water just seeps down through. The fog just drips in that area, and it just seeps down through this wall, and it's just completely covered with these. And when you put a little light on them, they turn all silver. It's real beautiful. It's called Fern Canyon. So here's the canyon also. And you can see the way that they propagate there. Also in the wall, you can see the little I forget what they're called, the little sporin. What are they?
Like a run?
No, the spores create these little teeny.
Sora?
Yeah, sora. It's similar to that. And this is the way that I grow this one at my house. This is a huge pot. This is like a 20-gallon pot. So it's a very big plant. And it's right outside my door. Every now and then I'll forget to water it for a couple weeks in the summertime, and it'll look completely dead, and it comes back pretty quick, though. But it does have its downtime of the year. Most ferns are in their downtime right now, but they're beginning to come back. So this is probably my favorite fern that I grow. It's the southern maidenhair fern. It's very beautiful, grows fairly quickly, also needs a fairly constant source of water, but it doesn't need much. It can do beautifully on a very little bit. I'll show you here how it does in the garden. This is at my house also. I grow a lot of things in containers at my place, probably because I run a nursery. This is the way that the southern maidenhair looks in the ground. This has one drip on it that goes on 2 or 3 times a week for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So it's very little. And on to the left of it there, I think you can see it better in another photo. Yeah, there to the left of it there is the Berberis. Which one is it? It's not Aquilifolium. This is the rare one. This is the unusual one. That's the Oregon one. The Oregon grape. I forgot the name. It'll come to me in a few minutes. But anyway, that's a very big one. The leaves on that get they're like this big, each leaf. So, and that's just a beautiful southern maidenhair fern with just a little bit of drip under an apple tree that needs a little bit of extra water. So it gets it from that. And that's about 5 years old now. The real pretty pot. Lady fern is the easiest of all ferns to grow and the fastest. You start with a fern that's, just start with a 1-gallon fern, and in 1 year it'll be this big, given enough water. And it likes to be in wet areas, that one for sure. It needs to stay wet. The lady fern will die if it doesn't stay moist all the time. So it definitely needs moisture, but they grow very quickly, and they're very beautiful, but they're also deciduous. So this is the lady fern also. If they can grow very large in shady situations where they get unlimited water. I've seen them this tall. So, and across they're like this big. So they get really big. Here's one in a pot. This was put in a pot. This is like about less than a year after it was planted in a 15-gallon pot. So this is one that's about this big. It's huge. And after a year, I had to take it out of this pot. This one is better in the ground if it can stay moist. So Here's often the way I use them. Lady fern is one of the few ferns that you can take full sun or full shade. It doesn't matter as long as it gets the moisture it needs. So in full sun, it needs a little bit more moisture. This is just one of the ways that I display and use them in my own garden and in landscapes. That's that big one that I showed you a few steps back right after I split it. So, and this is about a week after I split it. And so all the leaves died, and then these are all new ones, about 1 week after, maybe 2 weeks after. So very, very fast during its season. So then it starts to die down in the fall, and then around, this is probably November, December, and then they disappear altogether until the spring. So right around now, they're starting to come back. So here's one growing in a mixed pot. This is a small pot. So this one is not in this pot anymore. But I have it growing in with western wild ginger, the redwood sorrel, and the Epipactis gigantea, which is dormant at this point, which is the serpentine night stream orchid. It's a real beautiful native orchid, rare orchid. Blechnum spicant is the deer fern. This is a beautiful, beautiful fern that is difficult. It needs to be in full shade. As far as I'm concerned, I've had very mixed luck. I've had very good luck in some locations with it, but it seems to need a lot of moisture and a lot of shade. And in the sun, if it dries out, it looks terrible for a long time. So, and here it's growing in with some Ledum groenlandica, what's the common word for that? Labrador tea is growing in with it, which is it's related to manzanitas and blueberries. It has a pretty white flower. You can see it over here.
Yeah. Shiny.
Yeah, I grow that one also quite a bit. It's in Point Reyes also. Here's another one. This is one in a garden I did where it's very happy. Here's some more. This one actually is in a house not too far from here, but it dried out completely and got a little bit too much sun or something. I think it dried out totally. She tends to forget about her plants sometimes, and they dry out. So it doesn't look so great anymore. But it's right near here. It's at a house that's on the tour that's coming up. So I think it's here in Campbell. Here's the Blechnum spicant. This is what the ideal situation for it in most places, unless you live right along the coast where it gets a lot of fog. If you live inland, put it in a large pot like this. This is a 20-gallon pot, and this is on a porch that gets shade all the time, fairly bright shade, but no direct sun. And this is doing beautifully after 3 or 4 years now. It's still doing beautifully, the whole pot. It's got a bunch of stuff in there. The Claytonia Siberut, the spring beauties, redwood sorrel, and it's got more than what's on there, too. Here's one of my favorites to use. This one also can take full sun to partial sun, not full shade, but it's very, very easy. This one can dry out, but not totally. But it can take watering only once every couple weeks. Yes? So this is the Covell's lip fern. It's a local endangered species, actually, and I found it here in San Jose before, also up on Mount Hamilton. So. And it's a beauty. It grows much better in pots than in the ground for the most part. But it also does really well in large outdoor, I guess they're containers or areas where that are sort of have cemented off area, where it doesn't have competition. It does not like competition for the most part. So in the ground, you've got to be careful where you put it. It likes to be really next to rocks.
Temperature, certain temperature for the fern, or they need only moisture and enough?
Generally, this one, they'll all do okay as long as they get enough moisture. But generally not full sun. Like this one I would put where it gets morning sun.
For example, in winter when it's cold.
Oh, then you don't have to worry about for any of them. They might go completely dormant. Some things where, like the coastal wood fern, along the coast or where it doesn't get frozen, will stay green and nice year round. And where it freezes, it'll go dormant for a little while, but then it'll come back early. So really, you don't have to worry. natives are pretty tolerant of a little bit of freezing in general.
How big does this one get?
This one gets it gets to about 10 inches tall. I don't know why. Oh, because I have it in full sun. That one is in full sun. The one that's in the pot with a big stick in it. That's just a piece of burnt chamise stick that I stuck in there. I put wood in a lot of my pots with ferns, and they seem to really respond well to that too. Especially like the California sword fern really responds well to putting dead rotten logs on it. Really likes that. So here's another Calanthus covellii in a large mixed pot, growing with Hummingbird Mint, which is the red flowered mint, coyote mint there. And then the green sphere manzanita, which is our slowest growing manzanita available. And that manzanita can take some shade also, a little bit, and a madrone. So which when I use a lot of madrones in landscapes, and I often put ferns underneath them, and for some reason it seems to, maybe it helps them, or maybe they just both like the same conditions. They both like rotten wood around them. Sure. Hey, that's enough. There it is again. So, this is the same fern that I've been growing for years. That's in that pot there. And I've been splitting it up over the years and selling pieces of it. So, and this is a close relative of it that also grows locally. It's the graceful lip fern. You'll see this is a smaller one, and it's more narrow and long, the leaves. And I do grow this one also. I don't think I brought one. But this is a tough one to grow that I've been experimenting with, which is the American parsley fern from more in the Sierra. I think that it's found in the Santa Cruz Mountains also, but not positive. But it's very slow to grow. And this is one that I'm known for, that I've been growing for years, and that I've been propagating it with a little bit of difficulty, but been propagating nonetheless. A few years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago, I had a job where I had to widen a fire trail to go through in Castro Valley to get through allow fire trucks to get through, and I had to cut off this huge clump on the side of the hillside that was loaded with roots, the rhizomes of these. These grow by rhizomes. So far they've been impossible to propagate by spores for some reason in the U.S. anyway. I don't know anybody who's been able to propagate them by spores, but they do grow these big fat rhizomes that slowly grow, and I do break them and split and propagate them vegetatively that way. And so I've had quite a few over the years. And I just got a call to go widen once again the same fire road, so I'm going to have a bunch more soon. But I love the coastal wood fern. They're just a beautiful, beautiful fern. Grow. They're very hardy.
How big does that one get?
They can also get. I'll show you some pictures of some that are pretty tall, but generally they get under your knee height. But I have some that in pots and in the right conditions that are up to my belly button.
My mom has one that went up to her waist.
Yeah.
In a year, and she went, "Oh my God, that wasn't what I intended to do there." So one of my hopes was, how can I help her out there?
Yeah. Well, it could need a little bit more sun, and put it in a slightly sunnier spot, and it'll stay shorter. So they're fine in full shade also, but they will grow bigger in full shade.
Is that poison oak?
Yes, poison oak. That's in the wild.
That red looks familiar.
That's in Seaside.
Yep. It's not like that.
There's also wild rose growing in there. The gymnocarpus growing in there too. Oops, wrong way. So this is the beautiful leaf of the coastal wood fern. It is an evergreen fern, but if it does freeze really well for a couple times, it'll go deciduous. More of it growing where it's really happy. You'll notice the dead wood in the back there. This area, this is the kind of thing it really likes. It likes ash and dead wood. So more of them. Very lush one here in the Santa Cruz Mountains. That's right near the summit here. Same. Yeah, I've seen hillsides, just enormous hillsides, particularly in Castro Valley, but also in Orinda, that whole area that are completely covered with coastal wood fern. Here's one that's up to my chest, so in a nice large pot. This is growing with Darmera peltata, or the Indian Rhubarb, it's also called, which is a really interesting plant that is native to the Sierra. Here's one, a really interesting, beautiful, locally native fern that not many people have noticed. It's the coffee fern, and it's a Palea, or the cliff break family, which is a family of ferns that grows across the country, the whole U.S. pretty much, and very unusual everywhere, but very beautiful in a pot. I think I have one here, and maybe it's in my truck. I have a couple here for sale too. But those are bird's foot ones. We have two of them that are local. One is the coffee fern. This is the more common one, and which has a slightly larger leaf, although they're really small leaves. The other one is the bird's foot fern, which is tinier, more narrow, pointed leaf. Coffee fern. There's a coffee fern in the pot I showed you before. Here's a very rare one that I'm growing, but I didn't bring today because they're all dormant. This is from the Sierra, and it is that. It's not the photo. It is that silvery white. It's very, very white fern, very beautiful, and it's been very difficult to propagate. But I've gotten a few over the years, and but it's dormant right now, pretty much. Looks almost dead, but it's very pretty in the summertime. And then Palea mucronata, or the bird's foot cliff break. This is local. This is one of our hardiest ferns that we have, and I have a couple of those here. And they look prettier in pots, actually. But this one is growing up on Mount Diablo in a very, very sunny slope, which is just covered with them, with the clumps of these everywhere. This is it up close, where it gets a little bit more shade. So it gets a little green and purple stems, and where it's partially shaded. It's more sunny here. This is what it looks like, and this is a very small fern. This is only the clumps. That one, what you're seeing right there, is only about this big, so pretty small, and can take full sun. So there it is again. And then the goldback fern, which is a really beautiful fern to grow in containers, in particular. In the garden, it needs to be in the right location. It needs to be on a northeastern slope that gets plenty of moisture during the winter, and it doesn't matter in the summer. If it gets moisture in the summer, it'll stay nice year round. If it dries out, it'll go dormant in the summertime. But this stays really nice year round. This one has been in this pot from a small plant about a year and a half now. So it grows pretty quickly to really. This is the largest, most lush one I've ever seen, too. So, yes.
I don't want to interrupt, but will you talk about potting medium?
Soil, yeah. Talk about that. So, here's the goldback fern. This is very, very common. Probably our most common fern here, but it's also usually really small. This is an exception. Do anybody know why it's called the goldback fern? Yeah. If you pick a leaf off of it and press it against a pair of dark trousers, it'll leave an imprint, a little gold imprint. There's one that's closely related to it. Has anybody seen or heard of the one that's a pentagramma? It's the silvery white one. It has white leaves, and it's beautiful. It's very, very rare. It's known from only 2 locations in California, and 1 location or 2 locations in Arizona, and 1 location in Mexico. And that's it. But it's beautiful. And I've been trying to get some spores from that for years, so haven't yet. But the leaves are very silvery white. There's this one. Just like it is here.
Yeah.
Presentation is everything. So, Podium Californica. This is another one that's so easy to grow and looks great for most of the year in pots. And that's the really large one on the table there. That's one of these. And that one there has also only been a little bit over a year, maybe 2 years it's been in that pot. That's how big it is. They grow pretty quickly as long as they get plenty of moisture. They don't need plenty of moisture. They can do with a lot less. They'll just go dormant. But that one hasn't gone dormant at all in 2 years. So.
How big do they get?
They don't. I mean, that's as big as they'll get. both of those big pots have polypodiums in them. This one is a slightly different one, but that's as big as they get, pretty much. So they'll spread, though, around. And I've seen slopes, probably some of you have also, slopes just about almost as big as this wall, or I'd say half as big as this wall, completely covered with them, They love woodlands. They love growing in duff, the duff of trees, of redwoods. They love that. So here's a really large slope that's probably half to a third the size of it is in real life on the screen there. So they get big. There's that one, my nursery. So and this one is called Sarah Lyman, California polypody. And this one has an extra serration in the leaf, and it's found in 2 locations near Calistoga. Only 2 locations have been found on Serpentine, and it's a really easy one to grow and does great. Looks great in pots. Great at an entrance to a house, at the, like a little shaded porch area or shaded entryway. They look really great in a really cool pot like that. You don't even need to have holes in the pot. Those pots don't have holes in them. They don't need it. But I have them filled with medium so that they're not sitting in water either.
Do they stay green all year?
No, they will die back. Those ones die back. But they stay green about 9 or 10 months out of the year. So 8 to 10 months. They're really most of the year. And then they're pretty as they're dying too, as they turn gold and yellow and stuff. They're pretty, and then they're gone. For only like a month though, as long as they're getting water. Here's licorice fern. I have grown these also, and they're a little slower. These grow in trees. You'll see them around. There's 2 kinds that we have that grow in trees, and this is one of them, licorice fern. But they grow slowly in trees. I have gotten them established, but very slowly. But if you break their roots, you can smell. They really strongly smell of licorice. So, and this is the Polypodium schooleri, and I do have one over here. I mentioned this one already. This one is extremely slow, but really beautiful. And those leaves, they can get this big, each one. So in the right location, or even bigger. Yes?
No, sorry.
Okay. Here's a Polypodium schooleri that comes from the same one that I have here, that it has established in this tree in a garden that I did in Oakland. And here's just a little mixed pot of the Polypodium schooleri. Actually there's some Phacelia Bolander. That's a great, I want to mention that one. That's a really great woodland plant to grow, a woodland flowering plant with a pretty light blue flower that flowers on and off all year long, and has very pretty leaf, perennial, and it spreads. It likes shade, bright shade, and the duff of trees. It likes the stuff that falls from trees a lot.
You said it was
Phacelia
Phacelia?
Bolander, or Bolander's Phacelia. Along with some of the smaller alum roots, or Heucheras. So, and here's a really unusual one. I grow a few really unusual ones, and this is one of them. This is Polystichum dudleyi, which is Dudley's sword fern. You might have seen this down in Big Sur in the redwoods. Down in Big Sur, you can find these occasionally. They're about the size of a California sword fern. They can get very large, like 5 feet across. And this was given to me by Limekiln State Park for some work that I did for them a few years ago. And I've gotten 1 plant out of it so far, and 1 really large one, or 2, I should say. One of them is very large. It's a very pretty plant, evergreen. There it is. Another one that I grow is the Polystichum californica, which is it's the California sword fern, which is different than the common western sword fern. It's also doubly serrated like this one, but it has very narrow leaves on it. Presentation. It's at my house. Here's one that I've been experimenting with, and I actually have one here today. This is Polystichum imbricans, it's another sword fern, but it's a much smaller one. This is the narrow leaf sword fern. There it is, where it's super happy.
And what makes it super happy?
Coastal fog. Seems to really like coastal fog. So Definitely shade and moisture. They've looked pretty good in places where I planted them, as long as they're on a drip. Here's talk about super happy. These are super happy sword ferns in their ideal habitat, which is in a very moist coastal environment underneath buckeyes. Buckeyes I actually have one in, it's not here, it's in my truck. But I have a pot, it's a small pot where I've planted 2 buckeyes and actually the Polystichum imbricans, the other one, the smaller one, and some other stuff in this tiny little pot. They're all things that really like to be root bound, or do fine in being root bound. And buckeyes, I like to grow those together. When I plant them in the ground and for people, I'll put like 2, 3, up to 5 different ones together. I mean, right together. You take the soil off the roots and put their roots right against one another, and they'll grow into one single tree eventually. Most of them will, and they look really cool that way. So, and they also leaf out at different times and flower at different times. So, slightly different. So one of the greatest features of this California sword fern are the fiddleheads when they come out. I had a friend that was walking through the woods with me once, and she said, she goes, they remind me of little old men, the way they look when they're coming out. Here's a very happy big grove of them. They can be difficult in San Jose here and in Oakland for some reason. The more shade, the better. Like under redwoods, they're great, but not where they get any of our really strong afternoon sun. It tends to burn them, and it takes them a long time to recover from that. They get thrippy when they're burned. They get thrips, and they look terrible for a long time. So full shade and moisture. Here's one that they do great in pots, though, especially if they can be in almost full shade like this one is. This one has been in the same pot for, 10 years or so. There's one of the sculptures that I make out of junk I find. One of the things that grows great with sword fern is the salal, which is another member of the blueberry family. And this is in a garden in Berkeley where there's quite a lot of moisture in their yard there. It really does well there. Bracken fern is something that be very careful about where you plant it, because it really will take over an area. No matter what the area, it will take over pretty much. And this can grow in full sun also. But also people tend to avoid it entirely. And when it really has a great use, I mean, it seems like the only invasive plants people will plant are the non-native ones. But here's a native one that really is invasive. They can get quite large. They do great in pots. They do great in like sidewalk strips, where as long as they get a very little bit of moisture occasionally, they do better with that. Just spraying down once a month or so with a hose. You don't have to even soak them, but they'll look great, really great. And then they eventually will. This one is turning color in the fall. They're very, very green. They're really great texture to them. Very full, lush plants. Fiddleheads. They can get enormous. I mean, I've seen them taller than me, bigger than me. So in the Oakland Hills. So under the right conditions, they really. And the sunnier are, the shorter they are, in general. But there is a short variety that I found that I've been trying to grow that seems to be staying short. So from near Fort Hunter Liggett that I found, they all stay about this tall, but generally they get pretty big. There's generally in fields and open fields around, they'll go to about a little above the knee, like midway up the thigh, I'd say. Here's a field of them not too far from here, on right off Route 17, near the summit actually. It's a whole big giant field of them, and they turn these really pretty russet colors and yellows, golds in the fall. I love growing them with madrones. They seem to always be found near one another. Either madrones, I always plant them with either the bracken fern or the coastal wood fern, and they seem to thrive off one another. So here's a bracken fern that I've been growing for years in a pot, and it looks great. It is deciduous though, so it does go bad. Here's one of our most beautiful and our largest fern. I think this is the largest fern in North America. Yeah, this is a very large one. I found this growing in the wild near Sunol, where a single frond was over 12 feet tall. One single frond. So they get enormous. And they're usually found at springs or in creeks that run year-round, that don't dry out. And they're beautiful. They're really beautiful. Very easy to grow, too, as long as they're on an irrigation system or they're near where they can get into moisture all the time. The more moisture, the bigger they get. So these ones are all like 6 feet tall. Here's another. This is an enormous patch of them, bigger than this wall here. And shade or sun. You can grow them in full sun. I have some growing in full sun next to a little pond I did in Livermore, where it gets very, very hot and the conditions are really rough. But it's on a drip where it gets a little bit of 10 minutes of water every day, and it's doing beautifully. And it's right next to a little pond I did. So, growing here, it's growing with columbines here and a bunch of other stuff. Here, I love planting it in the sun with Lewis's monkey flower. They love the same conditions. And this is in Livermore. This looks really great year-round. So, and then great woodland plants, which I have, that pot is over there, is the Oxalis oregana, or redwood sorrel. And it grows very, very lush, where it gets a little bit of moisture. That's, at the bottom there, that's the Berkeley yard that is always very moist for some reason. They had a lot of problems with moisture at the house, so we did a lot of trenching and stuff around it that has worked pretty well for the house, but the yard maintains a lot of moisture. So I have like giant elk clover growing there, and it does beautifully, and the redwood sorrel just spreads like crazy and gets about almost knee height, which is unusual too. But I love this particular one that I've been growing with a really bright pink flower. They usually have white flowers. Another one that does great in the same conditions of the ferns is the Western Azalea. It's a little more difficult in the ground than in pots, but it does okay if you set it right. It does need to get some sun, though, in order to flower nicely. I've been growing them for years. A lot of them are fragrant. We have huge variety of them. In fact, most of the ones that are available, most of the different azaleas that are available in the trade have some of the California one in them, the Western one in them, because there's huge variety, and plus they're fragrant. So they've been used for a long time in breeding. The one on the right there with the red leaves, and next to the bluish leaf coffeeberry, is growing at the Cedars up in Sonoma County, which is this really amazing serpentine area that is owned by Roger Rage. And the leaves stay really red and gold, really beautiful colors on the azaleas there. This is one in my yard. So turning colors. Another one that grows along with ferns a lot is the wind poppy. This is an annual that's very easy by seed. Needs to get a little bit of direct sun, but it can take a lot of shade too. The deer will eat it to the ground. So, and here's a very easy one to grow. I have this in a corner of my yard. I have a really tiny house. It's less than 500 square feet, and I have a huge yard with a creek in it. So, and in one corner of the yard is this very large pot. This is a 20-gallon pot with this Taft's Gold piggyback plant in it. And I do have some of those with me. It's a really great plant to bring to a shady area of the garden, or mostly shady area, a really bright color. This is it. And this I ignore, I forget about. I've forgotten about for months at a time, for 3 months at a time, without giving it any water at all, and it just always comes right back and thrives beautifully. So this is often found around ferns also. The dog violet, very common.
How much light does that need?
The dog violet?
Yeah.
Probably a couple hours a day, hour or two a day. I grow them, and they do best in mostly shade. Dudleas, a lot of the Dudleas, people think Dudleas, oh, they must like full sun. You know, that you see them in the full sun on the coast. But actually, they do a lot better in partial shade, about half and half. And in fact, the pulverulenta, or what is it called, the chalk Dudlea, that one, I have some pictures of it. Here's one here. This is an unusual one. This is a large pot. This is like a 15-gallon pot. And this one happened to split right at the top there, so I got two. This is just an unusual one. But it still looks like this, and that's a couple years ago. So, but these like to be in mostly shade or all shade, this particular kind. And they kind of burn or stay smaller if they're in the sun. Although we've grown them in a lot of sun too, where they've done well. So who knows? But the Coast Live Forever also does really well in partial shade in inland. Here's different ones that have grown. That's another chalk Dudlea there. That one is enormous. That one's like 3 or 4 feet across. This is my favorite one, and this is definitely for the best condition for this is the dappled shade, like under a tree where that sun does come through, so it's not full shade, but dappled shade. And this is Hass's Dudlea, or the Catalina Live Forever. This is an absolutely beautiful Dudlea. It gets all these purples and pinks in it. Looks great year round. Doesn't get scraggly. It's a real beautiful plant. So I didn't bring any today, but I do have some in my nursery. And if you ever see it, pick one up. And that's a 20-gallon. Both of these are 15, 18-gallon plant pots. So they're big. This one's like 3 or 4 feet across now. Another one. And here's a little one that I've never figured out what species it is. This is from, it's one that I collected from, it was right in the middle of a road, of this little dirt road in Baja, in San Pedro. It's a highway that goes way up into the mountains there. And it had fallen right into the middle of the road, a clump of it. And I took it home, and I've never been able to identify it. But it stays really small, and it's very, very beautiful.
Is that a sedum?
It's growing with Sedum spatulifolium, or what's it called, Stonecrop?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a Sedum divergens. This is the Cascade Stonecrop on this side, which I grow a lot of that. That's a great, this little one here with the little leaves, that's a great plant for like green roofs that people haven't really worked with very much yet, but everywhere I've used it, it's made a beautiful carpet that in full sun it turns bright red for all year. Divergens. It's another endangered species from the Cascades. I grow a lot of those. There's that one again. Oops. Some blank. Okay, now I'm going to be into plants that are, this is a little messy in here, excuse me, but these are plants that grow well in shade and ferns. Rachel's red ribbons there, or the Santa Clara red ribbons also. Sorry, there it is. Santa Clara red ribbons is another one. Easy by seed, annual. There's the unknown Dudleas. The San Miguel Savory is a great one. It's closely related to Yerba Buena. It's in the upper right, and I do have some of those here. But this one forms a nice little hedge, or a nice little shrub, rather than a ground cover. This one is grows to about 6 to 8 inches tall. Very, very dense, and it grows great. And you can trim it into any shape you want, pretty much. Then there's the variegated piggyback plant, the Taft's Gold, Spring Beauties, very easy. Here's the San Diego Savory again, the southern Yerba Buena. Canyon Pink Alum Root, this is a great one. I have one here too. Also bay laurels, which are great container plants, by the way. They're very slow, but they need a large container, a large tall container. That's a pretty large can there that comes up to my waist. So, but they're beautiful plants, and they're great in cooking, and they smell great. You walk by them, and they can be kept forever in a container that size. I have one in San Francisco that's been in a smaller container and doing great. It's been in there for like 16, 17 years. So, with little, what's it called, little miner's lettuce growing all around it. So, here's another There's a mistake here, actually. The buckwheat does not belong with these other ones. That one I had to move. But the tiarella, these are sugar scoops here, which I have some over here. This is a local native that not many people know about, but it's Tiarella trifoliata, or sugar scoops. And it's a great plant, very, very easy, and looks beautiful most of the year in containers or in the ground. It's a ground cover. There it is in flower, also, sugar scoops. And it's definitely a pretty dense ground cover underneath redwoods or along a creek or something. Very easy. Here's one also that I've been growing for a long time. This plant is 15, 18 years old, and has a big, huge taproot on it that every now and then it'll send a small one off it. And this year I got like 5 of them coming off it. So in a big, tall pot, comes up to my mid-thigh.
Are you selling any of those?
I will be when I split it up. I'll sell the ones. But they're hard to find, especially with the big taproots when they're ready to flower. So this one I've had for a very long time. So. And the leaves are beautiful on it this time of year particularly. Another one that grows great in the dapple shades also is the western serviceberry. It can grow in full sun also. But this plant has been in this pot here for about 10 years. And every year it sends up a lot of suckers, and I dig out all the suckers and plant those up. Because this particular one produces so many berries. I get a handful, when it's producing berries, I get a handful of berries. This is in a pot, that's, I don't know, like a 15-gallon pot. And it puts a handful of berries every other day for like several weeks every year. And they're sweeter than blueberries. Really
And again, just
delicious.
12 hours of sun.
This can take full sun, or where I have it, generally it gets like 3-4 hours of sun.
And you're recommending a pot for lower maintenance with all the suckers and all?
No, it's great in the ground too.
Okay.
It's great in the ground. It stays small. It's not a big plant.
What is a sucker?
Sucker is where it sends out roots that come up above ground and turn into branches, turn into new plants. And I cut those off, making new. It's a suckering shrub. Yes.
When you keep referring to the duff, sometimes you said redwood duff, but something like this, are they sensitive to any particular kind of duff, or does it make any difference? Or are they just agreeable?
This one doesn't. This is very agreeable wherever it's been, wherever I planted it. Excuse me. I even have one as a bonsai. Wish I had a photo of it, but I'm growing in a cool pot with a cool little monster creature with it. What's that?
How big does this get?
This has stayed, including all the ones in the ground, have stayed under my waist, well, about my waist height for many years now. It's a great plant, very pretty leaves, deciduous. So other really great ones, the dog violet again, the Claytonia Andrewsii. This is the blue bead lily, or the western one. That's pretty hard to find. I had about 7 last year. Looks like I'm going to get about 10 more this year. So, it's a beauty. Look at the flower on it. It's really pretty. Very, very easy plant to grow with ferns or in the same conditions as the spring beauty. I have several here. They're so easy. Full sun, shade, full shade. They just do really well, and as long as they get moisture, they'll flower year round. The mountain strawberry is a great plant also, that little strawberry in the upper right. This is one that I found up in the Sierras that I call sage hen, and I've been propagating it for years now. And it has beautiful blue-green flowers, but it's dormant in the wintertime.
What's the species name?
It's Fragaria.
When you think of it,
Fragaria virginiana.
Oh.
Another one that loves the same conditions is this here, that the brown dogwood here. Beautiful red color to the leaves, and flowers really nicely too. Dapple shade to full sun it can take too. Very easy. They don't need nearly as much moisture as other dogwoods. So here's a monkey flower cultivars, like the same conditions also. This one is called Trish. I use a lot. This one I actually call forgot the name. I have a new name for that one. I forgot the name. The giant alum root from the islands. Very easy. And then a great container plant and in the ground plant, as long as it gets some moisture, is the giant elk clover. Gives you a lot of drama throughout the year because they get very huge. Has the largest leaf of any plant in North America. A single leaf, which has several leaflets, but it's a single leaf can get 8 feet across easily.
Oh my God.
So. And then the erythroniums, the fawn lilies, grow these in containers a lot. Same conditions. That again. Here's the Chilanthes covellii. Now the photos are a little out of order here. I haven't put these part in order. This is how it grows in the wild. Very hot conditions, but they do get fog. That's Mount Diablo, but it's a foggy area on Mount Diablo. Here's growing with the Hummingbird Mint again. That pot again. This is the Darmera peltata, or the Indian Rhubarb. I wish I put in a picture of the flower. It's got a beautiful flower on it. But these leaves, each round leaf is this big around on that thing. So, and this is a pot that doesn't have a hole in it. It has I fill it with water, and it's just got a little bit of soil around rocks, and the roots climb up over the rocks, and they form this like a basket that are holding the rocks together. It's pretty cool.
So is it almost like a water plant?
It is a water plant.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's also very forgiving if we give it water. Here's a couple of containers that I did for the Oakland Museum, and I'm about to work on a whole bunch more for them also, which they're great to work with at Oakland Museum. But these are shade containers. Here's the California hazelnut, which is our most beautiful tree shrub for shady conditions. I love using these in landscapes close to houses. Great for wildlife. They're just beautiful structure to them. They can get quite large, but they're slow getting large. So, I mean, they can get enormous, but you can shape them, you can keep them smaller very easily, very easily. And it depends on how much light they get, too, and moisture. But they're great plants.
How much sun can they tolerate?
They can tolerate almost full sun as long as they get some moisture. So just about full sun. Like on the side of a house, really, even a sunny side or a shady side of a house, they do great. So they're great branch structure. And then in the winter, there's no leaves in the wintertime, but then the catkins come out, which have a great form to them also. Here's there's some flowers of the Darmera peltata. This is one of the containers we did at the Oakland Museum. When we plant these, we have to walk among fish that are like 8-9 feet long. And they haven't hit me yet, but they hit the person I was working with, knocked him down. Sturgeon, great big sturgeon. So here's the best overall soil mix for natives. And in general, this is a great mix, but for ferns, for most ferns, I would say cut down on the pumice. Okay, you don't need pumice really with ferns, except for, I'd say, the Peleas and the Chilanthes, the lip ferns and the coffee fern. They could use the pumice, but the other ones, they don't need the pumice. So really, pure potting soil is great for most ferns. Pure potting soil, and then mulch with the duff that you find under trees. The wood fern loves oak leaves or redwood duff. Sword fern loves just to get a bunch of redwood duff. The duff is what falls from the tree, the stuff that piles up underneath them, the reddish brown stuff. And that's really most ferns live in that more than in the soil below it. So you can put a lot of the duff or mulch around them, and eventually they'll be growing more in the decomposing mulch than in the soil below. Okay, and I forgot my business cards. ¿Puedes traer mis tarjetas? Creo que están en medio de la silla, en esta cosa. Hay una caja. Here's the Dryopteris growing with the Darmera very happily in this plot. So miner's lettuce grows everywhere where ferns grow too. Here's another container that I did in the Oakland Museum, which a hawk nested above it and dumped so much stuff it killed the vine maple growing in it. So it dumped a lot of stuff, and nobody wanted to disturb it, so it was okay. This is another, the Dudley sword fern growing in there too. That's still alive. The deer fern and the ginger is doing well there. Did somebody
I was
else?
just going to say, how big is that pot?
It's very large. It's like 5 feet across. It's in the water, but it doesn't receive water from the outside. We have a special watering system for it that we had to develop because there's no hole in it anywhere. So, another beautiful one of these. And then this is here in Campbell also. This is the evergreen currant that forms a beautiful ground cover in the shade. And I recommend always cutting it at knee height or a little bit below knee height and allowing it to fill in that way. And it looks so beautiful year round. It's an evergreen currant, but it can also be espaliered really easily like this. It's much fuller than this now. It's really filled in. You can hardly see the wood behind it now. Another one of those. Here's that container I have with the. I was going to bring this one, but then it's mostly dormant. So that's that sage hen Sierra strawberry. So, and here's the place in Campbell here during a garden tour. So, we did this in stages. We did the front yard, or we did this side yard first. This is a couple years ago, so it's grown quite a lot since then. Then we did that back, that whole big open area on the other side about 2 years ago. And this part we did about 5 or 6 years ago. This is Diana Stanley's house. Everybody's seen it.
Between the fern and the grass, which one requires more water?
It depends on which fern, and probably depends on which kind of grass too. Sorry. Well, a normal lawn requires a whole lot of water, whereas any native will, the most they'll require, some of like the lady ferns, they require a little bit of water every day, or at least 3 times a week. So with that aside, the other ones can thrive on once a week water. So pretty much all of them. So maybe the giant chain fern needs twice a week. So, whereas a lawn, you need, how much water does a lawn need to stay really nice?
15 minutes, 3 times a week.
3 times
That's
a week.
spray, not
That's
drip.
minimum too.
Yeah, that's pretty minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say a lawn needs more water.
Is this house on tour again this year?
Yeah.
What street is it on? So we
Bell Estes. Bell Estes. Yeah, it's a nice one to see. And we did it for very inexpensively, actually also. Diana's a friend of mine. And we really, relatively for what it cost, we did it very quickly and
Are you going to be
inexpensively.
having your plants there again this year?
I'm going to, yeah.
So that's the other way.
I'm going to have a lot of
No, you're
plants
at the
there.
right one. His nursery plants would be being
Yeah.
is this in Campbell? Oh, good.
It's in Campbell, I think. It's Campbell. Or right near here.
It might be San Jose. I'm not sure if it's San Jose or
It's one-
Cambrian.
It has
Look for the one with the nursery.
on Bell Estes.
Yeah.
It's very close to here. It's right off
Here you go. Thank you.
anyway.
Yeah.
Forgot the name. Yes.
You show a lot of ferns in containers.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what is the predominant way that you water those? Or the people who have those water them? Is it through hand watering? Is it through drip, or is it some other means?
When they're mine, a lot of the ones we saw were mine at my house, and those ones I water them by hand. I don't have a irrigation system set up for them, but I like to water. And the ones that I do for clients, I almost always put an irrigation system, some drippers on them, almost always. So, yeah.
So what is the emitters rated at? Like 1 gallon per hour? Or?
It depends on how big the plant is. If it's a really big plant, I'll put a larger, like a 2 gallon per hour. If it's a small plant, like something like this, I would put on for half an hour, once a week. Or excuse me, half a gallon per hour
Yeah.
for 15 minutes once a week. That's plenty. Yes.
There's also the question of fertilization for
Don't.
the container plants.
Yeah, I don't fertilize them. Every time I fertilize them, I've regretted it. So I don't fertilize any of them.
Well, some of them will turn pale green, pale yellow, yellowish, if they don't have their
Well,
nutrients.
they turn that when they go deciduous anyway, but I do mulch them. I do mulch them in the pots. So I'll refresh the mulch that's in them, which is the duff, and that's what all the nutrients that they need from the duff that I add to the containers. And if it's something like the Chilanthes, I add because over time, even if I use a mineral mulch or a decomposed granite around them, I'll add more every couple of years, and that's all the nutrients they need. Ferns are very low feeders. Yes?
Hey, can you talk about your nursery and if plants are available for sale online or going there when your hours are? And I don't have time to have a nursery.
Okay, good. Here's some cards some business cards you can pick up. Can we turn the lights on now? And I'll just show you some of the plants. But these are some of the plants that I have at the nursery. And I do have these. If anybody wants to talk about buying any of these, we could talk about it outside afterwards at my truck, which is right outside the ramp there. So, these are a selection of things from my nursery. And I have a lot of plants at my nursery. I have online on my website, which is on my card. There's a what do they call it? Inventory list. I don't update it all that often, but I have a lot more than what's on there also. But my nursery is down in East Oakland, in the Fruitvale district. It's half a block from Fruitvale and Foothill Boulevard. Very easy to get to. But it's by appointment only, so please just call me. I'm there a lot. It's close to my house, so it's a very quick walk for me to get there. So it's pretty easy for me to meet people most days there. Yes?
With a fabulous pot collection, you care to share some of the places you pick up pots?
I sell pots also. But a lot of my pots I find. I use a lot of broken pots that I find, or I buy broken pots at a very, very cheap rate from the big wholesale pot distributors, and then I'll mend them in interesting ways. Like sometimes I'll drill holes all along where they're cracked, or all the way around. Sometimes I'll drill holes and then I'll sew them with wire, so that they look mended, but they look really cool. And things like that. And in garage sales, I get a lot of garage sales. I find a lot at the dump. But I also go to, I have the same supplier as the AW Pottery has, which AW Pottery, which is near me in East Oakland. The people that order for them, the guy that orders for them orders for me also. So I have the same price as they do. So, and they're the largest distributor in the Western United States. So. But yeah, I get them a lot of different places. Okay, any other questions? So, well, thank you. I hope you enjoyed that.